aware that this episode is one of the few in English for our podcast. It was recorded in English for the convenience to accommodate our guest speaker. As you know, Daniela and I, through Entrepreneur, the podcast, are dedicated to translating and making this knowledge accessible, sharing it with our French-speaking audience. You will find a French summary following this one on your regular listening platform. Thank you for your understanding.
Welcome to an intriguing episode of our Regenerative Tourism podcast. Today, we are honored to have with us Michelle Holliday, a renowned leader in regenerative practice. Michelle will be our guide as we navigate the intricate world of regenerative tourism and its transformative potential. Prepare for an enlightening conversation that delves into the essence of regenerative practices and their profound impact on the world of tourism. Michelle's expertise is sure to shed light on this fascinating journey towards more regenerative and thriving travel experiences.
Hi, Michelle. It's really a pleasure to have you today with us. How are you?
I'm great. Happy to be here. Thank you.
So before we dive into our conversation, let's introduce you to our audience. Michelle, you are a respected consultant, author, and researcher specializing in thrivability, a visionary concept that reimagines organizations and communities as dynamic, self-organizing, living systems. Your book, The Age of Thrivability, stands as a testament to your critical acclaim. You generously share your insight through various platforms, including conferences, webinars, and a compelling TED Talk. With a background in international marketing and Russian studies, your work benefits from a rich and diverse perspective, spanning brand strategy, employee engagement, consulting, and transformative dialogue facilitation within the global art of hosting community. Notably, your recent paper for Destination Canada, a regenerative approach to tourism in Canada, a co-authored with Bill Red, underscore your commitment to pioneering change. We are genuinely grateful to have you as our mentor also in our project, guiding us toward a more regenerative and thriving future. Thank you once more. So let's dive in.
You have worked with a number of destinations to help them adopt regenerative practices. How will you define regenerative tourism, and what does regenerative tourism involve?
I think of regenerative approaches to tourism as approaches that take an expanded story, an expanded understanding of what tourism can contribute to people and to place. And it's really rooted in that shift in how we understand organizations and communities that you mentioned as you introduced me, from seeing them as something separate from us, separate from nature, seeing them as machines, and instead seeing them as living systems, seeing that there is also life in us, in our communities, in our organizations. And with that understanding, then the goal becomes enabling life to thrive more fully. And that brings up different approaches to organizations, to tourism activities, and to communities.
Can you explain us a little bit more what is exactly regenerative tourism, how you can define that? For example, the difference between that one and sustainable tourism, because everyone think about that, but it's very hard to explain which it's the big difference.
The word regenerative might be a synonym for healing. You know, that only something that is alive is capable of regenerating itself. And so when we bring a regenerative approach, we're asking more of the tourist activities, of the activities of tourism. We're asking for it to generate more benefit than only economic, that it should also support the continued generativity and regenerativity of the living community and the living people there. Sustainability generally is sustaining, is keeping things the same. And we need those activities. We need activities that do less harm and that even restore what has been damaged. But if humanity is going to survive, the stakes are that dire. If we're going to make it through, then we actually need to work with life's natural principles and bring a greater degree of net benefit to people and place.
In your book, The Age of Thrivability, you delve really into the part of creating living systems. We'd love to hear your insight in a way that resonates with everyone. So how do you create a living system?
I don't think we create a living system. Life is. So the first part of stewarding a living system is to recognize that anything that is alive, any living system, whether it's you or your organization, your project, your community, because it is alive, it has more complexity and more potential than you can know and that you can fully control. And so you have to develop some practice of tuning in to what that living system needs, and you do it with yourself. Even you don't know your full potential and what you will need tomorrow. And so you're always sort of paying attention to what your emerging, evolving needs are. And you do this naturally with your organization as well, and you can do it with a community. With a community and even with an organization, you have to do it collectively. You have to have some practices. And this is a meeting where we ask, what are we noticing? What seems to be needed? But when we bring a regenerative approach, then we ask bolder questions. We ask bigger questions. Not only what money is needed, what would get us the most money, but what seems to need to be healed here? What more wholeness could be created? What would contribute more ability for life to thrive within this context, within our organization, within ourselves, within our community? And that brings up more possibilities, more creativity, and most of the time, more money also. It's more compelling for more people.
And what are the components of a living system? I know you've been really describing it in your book. Could you please maybe say it out loud for the audience?
Sure. There's a simple and straightforward set of what I think of as life's universal design principles, and they're present in ourselves, in our bodies, in rainforests, and also in projects, organizations, and communities. And when we're aware of them, then we can work with them more intentionally. So they are 4 things. First, that in every thriving living system, there are diverse parts. So we can think of that as us as people and as hosts, and we each have different gifts and contributions, and we want to be nourished in the process of sharing them. So the first thing is to ask what would enable us to thrive. So there are diverse parts. The second is that those parts come together in patterns of relationship. So this is where we come into interaction. It's everything that supports and connects us in interaction. So this is within the context of tourism, the act of hosting. This is the space of our encounter with each other and with visitors. And the third thing is that the parts come together in patterns of relationship in a way that enables the emergence of a new whole, a new level of life with new capabilities and characteristics that we don't find at the level of the parts. And that's the magic that we're after, that new things become possible because we come together in life and enabling life to thrive. So in human context, that's shared purpose that brings us together in wholeness. And in the context of tourism, this is the offering of hospitality. When we invite someone into our space of encounter, of hosting, what we're trying to do is offer them an experience of home and of wholeness and even of healing if we go to the depth of what's possible. So parts, relationships, wholeness, and then life is the fourth. That there is life, and we have to recognize that. Otherwise, we stay stuck in the dominant extractive and controlling paradigm, and we stay in the problems that we have within tourism today. When we recognize that there's life, then we're in a stance, in a role of stewardship and serving life's ability to thrive in participation with the whole living system that is that encounter, that is our organization, that is our community.
In a sense, so how can you apply all those vibrant principles to create really a living tourism system? How will it be a living tourism system?
It requires us to come together in our place, in our community, with other citizens, with other business owners, so that together we can identify what is the story of this place, what is unique to this place, what is the potential of this place, and what are its needs, and what is the unique contribution that this place can make to the world, the unique form of regeneration or of healing that this place can offer. And from that understanding and from that diverse perspective that you all come to together, then there's more creativity to refine our individual offerings as tourism operators. We find more creativity, more connectedness, and therefore more resilience in the face of crisis and change. So the foundation of regenerative approaches to tourism is coming together in community over time and in the shared practice of stewardship, stewarding the life in that place and in each of us, and offering something that is regenerative of people in place. And the important thing is to note that even though there's this phrase, regenerative tourism, that's become popular, it's not the tourist that has to do the regenerating. It's not the tourist's responsibility or even possibility. If people and place are what need to be regenerated, need to be healed, then that's our responsibility as a community to come together and create the conditions for that to happen.
So the tourist in that sense will be only a way to maybe help the community to come together and maybe also participate in certain activities that the community will be hosting and will be like, okay, that's really important for us. Like, for example, it can help us to, I don't know, maintain a language or clean up a beach, or so that's mean like it's the community that have to really organize activities that the tourists could do in order to make regenerative tourism.
Yes, exactly. So you invite them into patterns that you've already created within your community, and they can participate in that. But the regeneration happens within the community.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your paper, A Regenerative Approach to Tourism in Canada? What did you find?
We offered a series of principles for action, and really it comes down to recognizing your place as a living system, coming together with others to understand the story of that place as a living system, building relationships with others in your place over time so that you can develop creative approaches according to the authentic story of that place and the needs that you sense in that place and in the world that you can uniquely contribute to. So we called that a stewardship circle. Gather together a group of people who care about that place or could discover what they care about in that place, who could maintain a commitment to come together, support each other over time as business owners, as citizens, as government representatives, and could draw in others as well over time. But the core message is find the others who care about your place, come together over time in creativity, in generating new possibilities, new projects, support each other and learn together over time.
How you can develop a strategy for a whole country, and it's a huge country, and with a different, diverse actors, different people, different language. I think it's, as you said, it's very difficult.
I think there is a place for a national conversation and a national tourism organization. This is part of what the paper says as well, that regenerative action does have to happen locally, as you're saying, but maybe there is something that at least can be coordinated nationally, that a national organization can support local action and can support learning between communities. But I also think there's an interesting opportunity across Canada to have one particular conversation. I saw two years ago, in 2021, there is the clan mother of the Haudenosaunee Indigenous community who is responsible for giving or taking back names of people or of places. And she put out an announcement that said the name Canada is a Mohawk name, a Haudenosaunee name, and it means village. And we are not and have never acted like a village. And so she takes it back. We no longer have the right to use the word Canada. And her statement didn't get a lot of attention, but maybe it will, And so we have a few choices. One is to ignore it. And those of us who feel inclined to ignore it, we might hope it just goes away. Or maybe it won't go away and we'll have to change the name. And that's happening in New Zealand. It's becoming known as Aotearoa. The third option is that we have a national conversation and ask, what would it mean to be worthy of the name, to be a village? And that's a conversation that we could have across the nation and in individual places. So that's something I'm dreaming of, that kind of a conversation that could happen nationally.
And in that sense, how your paper was received by Destination Canada, as they're the one who committed it to you and to also Bill Reid. So how did you think they will use that paper to really put it in action? And how was their feelings towards what you've been reading in it?
It took quite a long time to develop it with them. And one of the people that we worked directly with was on a webinar Bill and I gave recently, and she shared openly. It was a lot of learning for her. So I really appreciated their openness to learning along the way. I see now that they have last week hosted a symposium around destination stewardship and regenerative approaches. So they brought people from around the country and around the world to have this conversation. So that's one indication of how they're moving forward. They've created a space on their website dedicated to this learning and sharing stories. So I expect to see other actions from them going forward.
So if we want to become a regenerative destination, how should we do, or who will be the main actor to help to guide this transition?
What I'm seeing in Canada is that there is this network of regional tourism organizations across the country, and that is where most of the action seems to be supported. I would say it's not always originating with the RTO, but when they are supportive, it makes so much difference. So, for example, I'm going on the weekend to Southwest Ontario, the Southwest Ontario Tourism Corporation. That's RTO1 among them. And they are particularly visionary. They're ones to watch. Part of what makes them, or part of what has supported them in being so visionary, is work with a man named Celeste Davar, who is an experiential tourism coach. And he deeply understands regenerative tourism, regenerative approaches to tourism, and coaches individual operators in how to understand their story, the story of their place, and create something that is fundamentally healing of people and place. So as he moves into, and as that regional tourism organization moves into a connected approach where those different operators are coming together and understanding more of the story of their place as they start to work together with the RTO, then it becomes even more compelling and creative and economically beneficial. So RTOs, I think, are where the action is, and that one is one in particular to watch.
In order to give an example, if I go to a place that says that they are doing regenerative tourism, how I can really know or see if it's that?
I look for a story of participation with the landscape, with the ecosystem that they exist within, and a story of participation with community as well. So I went to Costa Rica a few months ago and stayed at a regenerative ranch, and they had quite a detailed story of their work over a long time to regenerate the landscape, to redevelop its ability to function as a whole system. And there was a lot of complexity to it and a lot of learning. So maybe learning actually is at the heart of regeneration. Part of what I often say is that there's no straight line from the strategy we want to be regenerative to action. That the only way to get there is through learning, and it's learning together with the landscape and with the community. So maybe the shortcut is to ask, so what are you learning about what it means to be regenerative, and how are you adapting? But just to go back to the ranch, they were really embedded in deep participation with the landscape and had a clear story about how the landscape has changed and become more thrivable. And they had a similar story about their work in community. So story and learning, I think, are the two things.
As you are giving an example outside Canada, we wanted, and the podcast is for here, we wanted to know if you have or if you know some examples here in Canada that they are working in regenerative tourism?
There's one classic example, I think, that many people know of. This is Fogo Island, and many people know of it for one particular inn, Fogo Island Inn, and it's founded by a woman who made a lot of money and somewhere else and came back. Zita Cobb is her name, and so many people think it's just about the inn and just about her and her money. And if you aren't her and you don't have her money, then it's not possible in your community. But when you take a closer look, there's really this ecosystem of enterprises and of citizen action and of government support that comes together in a really generative and regenerative way. So people in the community are meeting on a regular basis to explore who we are together here in this place, what we want, and therefore what invitation we want to extend to others. And it's resulted not only in this fantastic inn that has really interesting cultural and sustainability features, like they put such a strong emphasis on local food, even though it's this remote island and it's very difficult to get most of your food locally. They have a economic nutrition label on everything in the inn. So it looks like a food nutrition label, but it tells you where all of the components of that piece of furniture came from, who made it, and how the costs were divided. So how much went to the person who made the chair and how much went to the person who cut the wood. It's really fascinating. So this inn has some fascinating details. But even more than that, there are many, many other initiatives, and all of them are economically stronger because they are part of a cohesive whole story and whole system that is more creative, more generative, more regenerative. So that's a very useful one to study.
And taking this example to a real engagement to people that want to travel, because we receive a lot of questions about that, how expensive is it? Like everyone can go there?
So one of the benefits to the tourism operator of a regenerative approach is that you can charge more money. And so that inn in particular is something like $3,000 a night. So it's very expensive and fully booked all the time. But there are other offerings within the community as well. They have a wide range of offerings that are also interesting and more affordable. So you can find the full range. It's really not necessarily about being high-end. It's about being deeply authentic, deeply connected, with a more compelling story and more of a commitment to doing more good, I would say.
And in a sense, like if you don't have a lot of money, like for example, you're a backpacker, you're young people, how could you can you participate in regenerative tourism? Like, is there a way for you to travel in that way?
Yes. There are more and more places around the world and across Canada that are exploring this question. So I think it's about looking for those places through podcasts like this one, identifying them. I think it's about showing up as a guest. So doing your part. If most of the work happens on the side of the community, some part of it does happen on the side of the visitor who comes with interest in the story of this place and not just consuming. Come as a guest, not as a consumer. Be respectful of the ecology and of the people, and shop at the local places and ask people about their stories. I think this is the best way to be regenerative. It's to contribute to a new story of what it can mean to travel and look for home wherever you are.
In a nutshell, what would you like the audience to take away from our conversation today?
In a nutshell, I would say that if we're really honest with ourselves about the state of the world, and even about what we can see is possible. I think we have this dual situation where there are such threats, there's such an existential crisis, and also so many encouraging things at the same time. So if we take both of those into account, I've written that we need every sector, including maybe especially tourism, to set down their tools for a moment, look around to the world and say, these are our skills and resources. How can we help? And I think tourism has such potential to contribute solutions and possibilities. And that's going to require deeper and bolder, more courageous conversations to imagine what that could be. Find others. If you are drawn to this conversation, find others. They're out there who are ready to have these conversations. And it takes conversations over time in your community to see what more might be possible.
Thank you really much for those insightful words and hoping to see you maybe again on the podcast. Thank you really much, Michelle.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup pour votre écoute. J'espère que cet épisode vous aura amené des réflexions et aussi des solutions, qu'il vous aura inspiré à opter pour un tourisme régénératif.
Si toi aussi tu veux changer les codes du tourisme, soutiens-nous. C'est très facile. Tu peux laisser une note positive sur notre podcast et le partager à ton réseau. En attendant le prochain épisode, tripons sur les réseaux. Merci et à tantôt.